I need someone who fits my future, Clara, not someone who reminds me of where I came from, he sneered, adjusting his silk tie, a tie she had worked double shifts to buy him. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the glass, mirroring the storm about to tear Clara's life apart. She was 28, drowning in debt, and about to be homeless. But as Liam walked out of that diner and into the arms of another woman, he made the biggest miscalculation in financial history. He didn't know that the woman he just discarded was the sole heiress to the largest private real estate portfolio in North America. And by the time he found out, it would be too late to say sorry. The fluorescent lights of the Rusty Spoon diner buzzed with an irritating hum that usually gave Clara Mitchell a headache by the end of her 10-hour shift. Today, however, she couldn't hear it. She couldn't hear the clatter of silverware, the sizzling of grease from the kitchen, or the grumbling of the regulars. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears. Sitting in booth 4, the one with the torn red vinyl seat, was her husband of 5 years, Liam Bennett. He wasn't wearing his usual worn-out flannel. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit, tailored and sharp. Sitting next to him wasn't his brother or a friend, but a woman Clara recognized instantly, Chloe St. James. Chloe was the daughter of the city's most aggressive real estate developer. She was beautiful, polished, and looked at Clara with the kind of pity one reserves for a stray dog. "Sign it, Clara," Liam said, his voice devoid of the warmth it used to hold. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Clara's hands, red and chapped from scrubbing dishes, trembled as she reached for the papers. "Liam, we talked about this. We said we'd weather the storm. I just picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. I can pay for your certification exams next month." Liam let out a short, cruel laugh. He glanced at Chloe, who smirked and checked her gold Rolex. "There is no we anymore, Clara," Liam said, leaning in. "Look at you. You smell like stale coffee and desperation. I'm moving up in the world. Chloe's father has offered me a junior partnership at St. James Development. I can't walk into those boardrooms with a wife who waits tables and shops at Goodwill." The cruelty of his words felt like a physical slap. Clara felt tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I supported you for 5 years, Liam. When you lost your job at the firm, who paid the rent? When you needed a car, who took the bus so you could drive?" "That's ancient history," Liam snapped, his patience thinning. "You were a stepping stone, Clara. A placeholder. Now sign the papers. I'm generous. I'm letting you keep the debt on the credit cards, since most of it was for household expenses anyway." "Generous," Clara whispered, staring at the document. It was an uncontested divorce filing. He wanted everything severed immediately. No alimony, no division of assets, not that they had any. Just a clean break so he could marry into the St. James dynasty. "I need this done today," Chloe spoke for the first time, her voice like crushed velvet. "We have a gala at the Metropolitan Club tonight. Liam needs to be a free man." Clara looked at Liam one last time, searching for a trace of the man she had married, the man who had promised her the world when they were both broke college students. That man was dead. In his place sat a stranger, blinded by ambition. With a shaky hand, Clara picked up a cheap ballpoint pen from her apron pocket. She signed her name. Clara Mitchell. "Good," Liam said, snatching the papers back instantly. He stood up, not even looking at her. "Pack your things. I want the apartment cleared by tomorrow. The lease is in my name, and I'm breaking it." "Liam, I have nowhere to go," Clara pleaded, panic finally setting in. "It's mid-November." "Not my problem," he muttered. He took Chloe's arm, and together they walked out of the diner, leaving Clara alone in the booth. The manager, A gruff man named Rick walked over. "Clara, if you're gonna cry, do it in the back. Customers are staring." "I'm not crying, Rick," Clara said, her voice steeling as she stood up. She untied her apron and threw it on the table. "And I'm not working. I quit." She walked out into the cold Seattle rain, homeless, husbandless, and penniless. She had $42 in her bank account and a maxed-out credit card. She walked for hours, the cold seeping into her bones, until she found herself sitting on a bench in a small park near the waterfront, watching the grey waves crash against the pier. She checked her phone. A notification from her banking app popped up. Overdraft fee applied. $35. That's all there was. She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Well," she whispered to the empty air, "it can't get any worse." She was wrong. It was about to get much, much stranger. Clara spent that night in a 24-hour laundromat, pretending to wash the same load of clothes over and over again, just to stay warm. By morning, she was exhausted, hungry, and her spirit was fractured. She was sitting in a public library, using the free Wi-Fi to search for women's shelters, when a man in a pristine black suit approached her table. He looked out of place among the dusty bookshelves and homeless patrons sleeping in chairs. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that looked more expensive than Clara's entire life history. "Mrs. Bennet?" the man asked softly. Clara looked up, startled. "It's Mitchell. Clara Mitchell. And if you're a debt collector, you're wasting your time. You can't get blood from a stone." The man smiled gently. It wasn't a predatory smile. It was professional, almost reverent. "I'm not a debt collector, Miss Mitchell. My name is Silas Sterling. I am the senior executor for the law firm Sterling, Cooper, and Weiss, based in New York." Clara frowned. "New York? I've never been to New York." "No, but your grandmother was," Silas said. He pulled out a chair. "May I?" Clara nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "My grandmother died before I was born. My mum said she was a seamstress. Your mother protected you from the truth, perhaps to give you a normal life, or perhaps because she was estranged from her own mother," Silas explained, opening a leather briefcase. He pulled out a file stamped with a wax seal. "Your grandmother was indeed a seamstress 50 years ago, but she was also a woman of incredible business acumen. Her name was Evelyn Caldwell." Clara stared at him blankly. Caldwell, like the Caldwell Trust? Even in her poverty, Clara knew the name. The Caldwell Trust owned half the skyline in Chicago, vast stretches of land in Montana, and premium commercial blocks in Manhattan. It was an empire of old money and quiet power. "Precisely," Silas said. "Evelyn Caldwell passed away 3 days ago. She had been watching you for years, Clara. She knew about your mother's passing. She knew about your struggle. And she knew about your husband." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "She watched me struggle? She watched me eat instant noodles for dinner for 3 years and did nothing?" "It was a test," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Evelyn believed that wealth without character is a curse. She wanted to see if you would remain kind, hard-working, and loyal despite your hardships. She wanted to know if you were different from the people who usually surround the wealthy. People like Liam Bennett." Clara flinched at the name. "She had private investigators tracking you," Silas continued. "When Mr. Bennett served you divorce papers yesterday, a clause in Evelyn's will was triggered. Had you stayed married to him, the inheritance would have been placed in a trust until you were 50, to prevent him from accessing it. But since he has legally severed ties..." Silas slid a document toward her. It wasn't a bill, it was a statement of assets. You are the sole beneficiary of the Caldwell estate, Clara. As of this morning, you are the owner of assets valued at approximately $1.3 billion, including liquid cash reserves of $80 million immediately available to you. The library spun. Clara gripped the edge of the table. This is a joke. Is this a prank show? Where are the cameras? This is very real, Miss Mitchell, Silas said, handing her a heavy black debit card. It was made of metal and had no numbers on it, just a chip and her name. This is your Centurion card. It is linked to your private holding account. I have a car waiting outside. We need to get you to the airport. The board of directors is waiting to meet you in New York. Clara looked at the card. Then she looked at her reflection in the library window, hair messy, wearing a thrift store coat. I can't go to New York, she stammered. I look like a mess. Silas stood up and buttoned his jacket. Ms. Mitchell, when you have $1 billion, you don't look like a mess. You look like you're setting a trend. However, if it makes you comfortable, we have a stylist waiting at the Four Seasons downtown to prepare you for the flight. Clara stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. Yesterday she had lost everything. Today, she owned everything. What about Liam? She asked, a sudden darkness entering her voice. Silas paused. A glint of steel appeared in his eyes. Mr. Bennett has made his choice. He chose a junior partnership at a local firm over the Empress of Real Estate. He is currently unaware of your change in circumstance. We can keep it that way for as long as you like. Or, Silas tilted his head. We can make his realization painful. Clara thought about the rain. She thought about the way Liam had looked at her in the diner. She thought about Chloe's smirk. Don't tell him, Clara said, her voice firming up. Not yet. I want him to succeed. I want him to climb that ladder. I want him to get to the very top, thinking he's won. Silas raised an eyebrow. And then? Clara clenched the black card in her hand. And then, I want to be the one who owns the ladder. Silas smiled, a genuine shark-like grin. I think you're going to be an excellent chairwoman, Miss Mitchell. Shall we? They walked out of the library. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom was parked illegally at the curb, a police officer standing nearby. Instead of writing a ticket, the officer was chatting respectfully with the driver. As Clara approached, the driver opened the rear door. She slid into the butter-soft leather interior. It smelled of expensive cologne and opportunity. As the car pulled away, Clara watched the streets of Seattle pass by, the streets she had walked in the rain just hours ago. Where to first, Miss Mitchell? Silas asked from the seat across her. The Four Seasons, Clara said. And Silas, get me the best divorce lawyer in the country. I signed Liam's papers, but I want to make sure the door is sealed shut before I open the vault. Way ahead of you, Silas replied, tapping on a tablet. I've retained Harrison and Ford. They eat sharks for breakfast. Clara leaned back and closed her eyes. The nightmare was over. The game had just begun. The suite at the Four Seasons was larger than the entire apartment Clara had shared with Liam. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, but Clara turned her back on the city. She sat in a velvet chair, facing a vanity mirror that reflected a woman she barely recognized. A team of 3 stylists, led by a sharp-tongued Frenchman named Henri, hovered around her. The hair, Henri declared, lifting a strand of Clara's limp, mouse-brown hair. It is sad. It apologizes for existing. We must change it. Do whatever you want, Clara said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. Just make me look like someone who can't be hurt. 3 hours later, the woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her hair was now a rich, dark espresso, cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her jawline like a blade. Her skin, previously dull from stress and poor diet, glowed under expert contouring. But it was the clothes that completed the illusion. She wore a cream-colored cashmere power suit by Armani, tailored within an inch of its life. On her feet were Christian Louboutin pumps, sold in red, like a warning. Silas Sterling entered the room, paused, and nodded with approval. "The board won't know what hit them. The jet is fueled, Ms. Mitchell. We leave for New York in 20 minutes. On the private Gulfstream G650, Clara didn't sleep. Instead, she spent the 5-hour flight devouring the files Silas had provided. She memorized names, profit margins, debt ratios, and asset locations. She had spent 5 years managing a household on minimum wage. She knew how to budget. She realized quickly that a billion-dollar corporation wasn't so different from a household budget. It just had more zeros and less forgiveness. They landed in Teterboro and took a helicopter to Manhattan. The Caldwell Trust headquarters was a monolith of steel and glass on Park Avenue. The boardroom was freezing. A long mahogany table dominated the room, surrounded by 12 men and 1 woman, all of whom looked at Clara with thinly veiled skepticism. At the head of the table sat Tobias Rourke, the interim CEO. He was a bulldog of a man, thick-necked and red-faced. "Ms. Mitchell," Tobias said, not bothering to stand up. "This is unexpected. We were under the impression Evelyn would leave the trust to a charitable foundation, not an estranged granddaughter with 0 corporate experience." Clara stood at the foot of the table. She didn't sit. She placed her hands flat on the cold wood and leaned forward. "And I was under the impression that the Caldwell Trust saw a 4% decline in quarterly revenue under your leadership, Mr. Rourke," Clara said, her voice steady. She had memorized page 42 of the file. The room went silent. "That was a market correction," Tobias sputtered, his face reddening. "That was negligence," Clara corrected him. "I saw the portfolio. You're over-invested in commercial retail malls in the Midwest. Malls are dying. My grandmother knew that. Why don't you?" She walked slowly down the length of the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. "You think I'm a waitress," Clara said, looking each board member in the eye. "You think I'm uneducated trash who got lucky. And you're planning to vote to form a conservatorship to manage the money for me. I read the meeting agenda you tried to hide." She stopped behind Tobias's chair. "But here is the reality. I know what it costs to survive when the system fails you. I know the value of $1 better than any of you who have never had to choose between heating and eating. I am not here to be a figurehead. I am here to work. And if you don't like it, you can resign. My grandmother left me 51% of the voting stock. I am the majority. I am the boss." She turned to Silas. "Silas, fire the analyst who recommended the Midwest Mall acquisition." "Done," Silas said, typing on his phone. Clara looked back at Tobias. "And Mr. Rourke, you're on probation. Impress me in the next quarter, or you're next." She sat down at the head of the table. "Now, let's talk about Seattle." 8 months passed. In Seattle, the rain continued to fall, washing away the memory of Clara Mitchell. Liam Bennett adjusted his tie in the mirror of the penthouse he now shared with Chloe. It was a stunning apartment, overlooking the Space Needle, but it felt like a prison. "Liam!" Chloe's voice shrieked from the bedroom. "Why isn't the car ready? Daddy is waiting for us at the club." "I called the driver 10 minutes ago, Chloe," Liam yelled back, fighting the urge to punch the wall. Life with Chloe St. James was a nightmare wrapped in designer silk. She was demanding, petty, and cruel. She treated Liam not as a husband, but as an accessory, something to wear on her arm at galas. Liam's career at St. James Development hadn't gone as planned either. Robert St. James, his father-in-law, had given him the title of Vice President of Acquisitions, but the role was hollow. Liam had no real power. He was a glorified errand boy, sent to strong-arm tenants and deliver eviction notices. Every day, Liam thought about Clara. He thought about how she used to massage his shoulders after a long day, how she would make him coffee exactly the way he liked it. He had tried to find her a few months ago, just out of curiosity. He drove by their old apartment, but the landlord said she'd vanished. He checked social media, but her accounts were deleted. She's probably living in a trailer somewhere, Liam muttered to himself, trying to validate his choices. I made the right move. Look at this suit. Look at this view. But the view didn't comfort him, especially not with the looming crisis at work. St. James Development was in trouble. Robert had bet the entire company's future on the Obsidian Project, a massive luxury complex on the waterfront. But construction costs had skyrocketed, and the banks were getting nervous. They needed a massive injection of capital, or the St. James Empire would crumble. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in New York, Clara Mitchell had ceased to exist. In her place was Clara Caldwell. She had spent the last 8 months in a grueling boot camp of finance, real estate law, and corporate strategy. She worked 18-hour days. She absorbed information like a sponge. The softness was gone from her face, replaced by a cool, elegant reserve. She sat in her office on the 80th floor, looking at a digital map of Seattle. Status on the St. James debt? She asked, not looking up. Silas, who had become her most trusted advisor and father figure, stood by the window. We've acquired 60% of their outstanding loans from the secondary market. We effectively own their mortgage. If they miss one payment on the Obsidian Project, we can foreclose. Clara swiveled her chair around. She looked expensive. Dangerous. And how close are they to missing a payment? They have liquidity for maybe 2 more months, Silas said. Robert St. James is desperate. He's looking for a silent partner, someone to bail him out without taking control. Clara smiled. It was a cold smile. He wants a savior. We're going to give him a shark. Do you want to initiate contact? Silas asked. Not yet, Clara said. Let them sweat. I want Liam to feel the pressure. I want him to see the walls closing in. What is Liam's role in the Obsidian Project? Robert has put him in charge of securing the final investor, Silas replied, checking his tablet. It's a test. If Liam fails to find the money, Robert will likely fire him. And given the prenuptial agreement Liam signed, if he loses his job, he likely loses the marriage. He signed a prenup, Clara asked. An ironclad one. If they divorce, he walks away with nothing. No alimony, no assets. He's more trapped than you ever were. Clara stood up and walked to the window. She looked at the New York skyline, but in her mind, she was back in The Rusty Spoon, watching Liam throw $6 on the table. He told me I was a stepping stone, Clara whispered. He told me he needed someone who fit his future. She turned back to Silas. Set it up. Create a shell company. Call it Nemesis Holdings. Tell St. James that we are interested in funding the Obsidian Project, but we have conditions. Specifically, we want to meet the lead negotiator in person. You want to see him? Silas asked gently. No, Clara said. I want him to see me, but not yet. Tell them the CEO of Nemesis Holdings will be at the Grand Real Estate Gala in Seattle next week. Tell them if Liam Bennett can convince me to sign the check, they get their money. Silas nodded. A high-stakes pitch. Exactly, Clara said. Prepare the jet, Silas. We're going home. The week leading up to the Seattle Real Estate Gala was the most stressful of Liam's life. Robert St. James had been screaming at him since Monday. You find this money, Liam, or you're out on the street. I didn't let you marry my daughter so you could drag this family into bankruptcy. Liam had cold-called 50 investment firms. All of them said no. The Obsidian project was too risky. Then the email came. Subject: Investment Inquiry. Obsidian Project. From Silas Sterling, Director of Operations, Nemesis Holdings, Mr. Bennett. Our firm represents a private capital group interested in high-risk, high-reward ventures. We have reviewed the prospectus for the Obsidian Project. We are willing to provide the $200 million gap financing you require, pending a face-to-face meeting with our CEO. Our CEO will be attending the Emerald City Gala this Saturday. You will have 15 minutes to pitch your case during the cocktail hour. Liam nearly wept with relief. He printed the email and ran into Robert's office. "I found it," Liam panted, slamming the paper on the desk. "Nemesis Holdings. They have the cash. They want a meeting." Robert scanned the email, his eyes narrowing. Nemesis? Never heard of them. Must be foreign money or new tech money. Who is the CEO? It doesn't say, Liam admitted, but Silas Sterling is a serious name. He's a heavyweight lawyer from New York. Fine, Robert grunted. You handle the pitch. But don't screw this up, Liam. This mysterious CAO holds our lives in their hands. You charm them. You lie to them if you have to. Just get the signature. Saturday arrived. The Emerald City Gala was held at the Chihuly Garden and Glass Museum, a venue of breathtaking color and light. The city's elite were there. Tech billionaires, politicians, and the old guard of Seattle society. Liam wore a new tuxedo, but he felt like he was suffocating. Chloe was already drunk, flirting with a tennis pro near the bar. Liam stood near the entrance, clutching his tablet, sweating. "Relax," Robert hissed in his ear. "You look like a fugitive. Straighten your back." "I'm nervous," Liam whispered. "I don't even know who I'm looking for." "Sterling said he'd find you," Robert said. At 8 p.m. exactly, the room seemed to shift. The ambient chatter quieted down as a group entered the main hall. It was an entourage. 4 security guards in black suits cleared a path. In the center walked a man with silver hair, Silas Sterling, and next to him was a woman who stopped the room's breath. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. It was backless, revealing skin that looked like porcelain. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat, not the flashy costume jewelry Chloe wore, but serious, heavy stones that caught the light with a cold fire. She wore a Venetian masquerade mask, covering the upper half of her face, adding to the mystery. She moved with a predator's grace. Every head turned. Who was she? "That must be her," Robert whispered, awestruck. "Look at the way she walks. That's billions, Liam. That's pure power." Liam swallowed hard. He adjusted his tie and stepped forward as the entourage approached. Silas Sterling spotted Liam and stopped. He whispered something to the woman in the mask. She paused, tilting her head slightly, studying Liam through the eye holes of the mask. Her eyes were dark, intense, and terrifyingly familiar, though Liam couldn't place why. "Mr. Bennett," Silas said, his voice smooth as silk. "I presume?" "Yes," Liam said, extending a shaking hand. "Liam Bennett. It's an honor." The woman did not shake his hand, she just looked at him. "This is the chairwoman of Nemesis Holdings," Silas introduced. "She prefers to remain anonymous until business is concluded. She has agreed to hear your proposal." "Thank you," Liam said, his voice cracking. "Please, let's go to the private lounge." They moved to a secluded area of the museum, away from the prying eyes of the party. The woman sat on a leather sofa, her posture regal. Silas stood behind her. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Bennett," the woman said. Her voice was altered, slightly synthesized, perhaps by a device in the mask, or maybe she was just speaking in a lower register. But it sent a shiver down Liam's spine. Liam launched into his pitch. He showed the graphs. He talked about projected ROI. He talked about the luxury amenities of the Obsidian Towers. He was desperate, and it showed. He was begging. "We just need a partner who sees the vision," Liam concluded, sweat dripping down his temple. "St. James Development is a family company. We value loyalty and integrity." At the word integrity, the woman let out a low, soft laugh. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Integrity," she repeated. "That is a fascinating word coming from you, Liam." Liam froze. The way she said his name, no synthesizer could hide the inflection. "I'm sorry," Liam stammered. The woman reached up. The room went dead silent. "You said you wanted a partner who fits your future," she said, her voice returning to its natural, clear tone, a voice Liam had heard every day for 5 years. "You said you needed to cut ties with the past." She pulled the ribbon of the mask. The velvet fell away. Liam's brain short-circuited. He looked at the high cheekbones, the sharp makeup, the billion-dollar diamonds. He looked at the eyes of the woman he had discarded in a diner for the price of a hamburger. "Hello, Liam," Clara said, smiling the smile of an executioner. Liam stumbled back, hitting a waiter's tray, glasses shattered on the floor. "Clara? No, that's impossible. You're a waitress." "I was a waitress," Clara corrected, standing up. She towered over him in her heels. "Now? I'm the one buying your debt. I'm the one holding the mortgage on your father-in-law's company. And I'm the one deciding if you have a job tomorrow." The commotion attracted attention. Robert St. James rushed over, followed by Chloe. "What is going on here?" Robert demanded. "Did he offend you, Madame Chairwoman?" Clara looked at Robert, then at Chloe. Chloe looked confused, squinting at Clara as if trying to recall a bad dream. "You!" Chloe gasped. "The dishwasher." "I prefer landlord now," Clara said icily. She picked up Liam's pitch deck from the table and dropped it into a nearby trash can. "Mr. St. James," Clara said, addressing Robert, "your son-in-law just gave a very passionate speech about loyalty. It's a shame he doesn't know the meaning of the word. I am rejecting your financing proposal." "What?" Robert turned pale. "You can't! We'll go under! We'll lose everything!" "I know," Clara said. "That's the point." She turned to leave, but Liam grabbed her arm. It was a reflex, a desperate move. "Clara, wait!" Liam shouted. "You can't do this! We were married! I loved you!" Silas stepped forward and removed Liam's hand from Clara's arm with a grip like a vice. "Touch her again, Mr. Bennet, and you won't have hands to sign your bankruptcy papers." Clara looked at the spot where Liam had touched her. She brushed it off as if it were dust. "You loved me when I was useful, Liam," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Now, you're just a line item in my ledger, and I'm cutting costs." She turned and walked away, her midnight blue dress flowing behind her like a storm cloud. Silas followed. Liam stood amidst the shattered glass, the eyes of the entire Seattle elite burning into him. Robert St. James turned to Liam, his face purple with rage. "You knew her?" Robert screamed. "You were married to the Caldwell heiress, and you divorced her for my daughter?" "I didn't know," Liam cried. "You're fired," Robert spat. "Get out of my sight. And Chloe, call the lawyers. Get this loser out of our family." Liam looked at Chloe. She turned her back on him. He was alone. Again. But this time, there was no diner booth to sit in, and no Clara to pick up the pieces. The fallout from the Emerald City Gala was not a slow burn. It was a nuclear explosion. By Monday morning, the gossip columns in Seattle were on fire. The headline of the Seattle Times business section read, Mystery Heiress Unmasked, the waitress who bought the skyline. For Liam Bennett, the world had turned upside down. Saturday night had ended with him standing in the rain outside the museum, banned from the St. James limousine. He had taken a taxi back to the penthouse, only to find the locks changed. The doorman, a man Liam had tipped poorly for months, looked at him with grim satisfaction and handed him a cardboard box containing his clothes and toiletries. "Mrs. Bennett? Sorry, Miss St. James. Said you are not to enter the premises," the doorman stated. "She also said to tell you that her lawyers will be in touch regarding the annulment." Annulment. They weren't even going to give him the dignity of a divorce. They were going to erase him. Liam spent Sunday in a cheap motel near the airport, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the image of Clara in that midnight blue dress. How had he missed it? How had he lived with a woman for 5 years and not known she was royalty? But the sickening realization that churned in his gut was simpler. She hadn't been royalty when he left her. She became royalty because he left her. On Tuesday, the hammer fell on St. James Development. Clara sat in the boardroom of the St. James office tower. She wasn't a guest. She was the executioner. Across from her sat Robert St. James, looking 10 years older than he had 2 days ago. His lawyers were sweating. "The terms are non-negotiable, Robert," Clara said, flipping through a file. "You defaulted on the bridge loan yesterday. Nemesis Holdings is exercising its right to foreclose on the Obsidian project and the St. James commercial portfolio to recoup losses." "You can't do this," Robert wheezed. "This company has been in my family for 3 generations. You're stealing it." "I'm not stealing it," Clara replied calmly. "I bought your debt. You took the money. You failed to pay. That is how business works. Isn't that what you told the tenants at the Highland Park complex when you evicted them last winter to build condos?" "It's just business," Robert slammed his fist on the table. "This is personal. You're doing this because of Liam." Clara paused. She looked at Silas, then back at Robert. "Liam was a bad investment, Robert. We both made the mistake of trusting him. But I cut my losses. You doubled down." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "My team will be here in the morning to begin the transition. We are rebranding the company. The St. James name is toxic." As Clara walked out of the office, she passed a cubicle near the elevators. It was empty, a half-filled box of office supplies sitting on the desk. It was Liam's old desk. She didn't stop. But Liam wasn't done. Desperation is a powerful hallucinogen, and Liam had convinced himself that there was still a chance. He believed that underneath the diamonds and the cold exterior, the old Clara, the woman who loved him unconditionally, was still there. He waited for her. For 3 days he camped out near the entrance of the Four Seasons, wearing the same suit he had worn to the gala, now wrinkled and stained. When he finally saw the black Rolls-Royce pull up, he rushed forward, pushing past a bellhop. "Clara!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. Security guards moved to intercept him, but Clara held up a hand. She stepped out of the car, looking at him with an expression that wasn't anger. It was pity. "Let him speak," she told the guards. Liam stumbled forward, stopping a few feet away. He looked at her, searching for the warmth he remembered. "Clara, please," he begged. "I know I messed up. I know I was an idiot. But think about what we had. 5 years. We struggled together. We dreamed together. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything to me, Liam," Clara said softly. "It meant enough that I was willing to work double shifts until my feet bled so you could study. It meant enough that I forgave you when you were moody or broke or selfish." "I can change," Liam cried, tears streaming down his face. "I see it now. The money doesn't matter to me. I just want you. I want my wife back." Clara shook her head slowly. "You don't want your wife, Liam. You want the woman in the Rolls-Royce. If I were still working at the Rusty Spoon, if I were still wearing that apron and smelling like grease, would you be standing here? Or would you be chasing the next Chloe St. James?" Liam opened his mouth to lie, but the words died in his throat. Under her piercing gaze, he couldn't pretend. "I thought so," Clara said. She reached into her purse. Liam's heart leaped. Was she going to give him money? A check? A key to an apartment? Clara pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. She handed it to him. Liam looked down. It was the receipt from the diner. The one from the day he divorced her. It showed the price of 2 coffees and a side of fries. And at the bottom, written in his own handwriting, was the tip he had left her. 600 rublos. "You left this on the table when you walked out," Clara said. "I kept it, to remind me of what I was worth to you." "Clara." "Keep it," she said, her voice hardening. "Invest it wisely. It's the last thing you'll ever get from me." She turned and got back into the car. The heavy door slammed shut with a sound like a coffin closing. As the car drove away, Liam was left standing on the curb, clutching a grease-stained receipt, watching his billion-dollar mistake disappear into the Seattle traffic. 1 year later, the Seattle skyline had been irrevocably altered. Where the rusted, abandoned steel skeleton of the failed Obsidian project once stood, a monument to greed and poor planning, a new structure now pierced the low-hanging clouds. It was a marvel of modern engineering, a twisting spire of glass and vertical gardens that seemed to breathe with the city. It was named the Evelyn Tower. It was the crown jewel of the Caldwell Trust's portfolio, but it was also a slap in the face to the traditional real estate moguls who had laughed at Clara Mitchell just 12 months prior. The building was a revolutionary mixed-use concept. The bottom 15 floors were designated as high-quality, subsidized housing for the city's service workers, teachers, nurses, and, yes, waitresses, while the upper floors housed the most expensive commercial office space in the Pacific Northwest. The rent from the tech giants at the top paid for the homes of the workers at the bottom. Wall Street analysts had called it financial suicide. Today, upon its opening, it was 100% occupied and projected to be the most profitable building in the city's history. On the 90th floor observation deck, the air was thin and crisp. A string quartet played softly in the corner, competing with the murmur of Seattle's elite. Senators, tech moguls, and foreign dignitaries, all waiting for a glimpse of the woman who had built this. Clara stood at the edge of the terrace, her hands resting on the cold glass railing. She wasn't wearing the severe power suits that had been her armor during the hostile takeover of the St. James assets. Today, she wore a dress of soft, ivory silk that moved with the wind, simple, yet radiating quiet, untouchable wealth. The watch on her wrist was a vintage Patek Philippe, the only tangible item she had kept from her grandmother's personal collection. Silas Sterling appeared at her elbow, silent as a ghost. He held 2 crystal flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "The mayor is asking for you, Clara," Silas said, his voice low. "And the governor is trying to convince the press that he supported this project from day one, despite the public record stating otherwise." Clara took the glass, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Let them talk, Silas. Success has 1,000 fathers, while failure is an orphan. I remember who stood by me when this was just a blueprint and a crater in the ground." "Your grandmother would have loved this view," Silas remarked, looking out over Elliott Bay, where the ferries cut white lines across the dark water. "She always wanted to change the skyline, but you changed the city's soul." Clara took a sip of the champagne. It tasted like victory, cold and sharp. "I didn't do it to change the soul, Silas. I did it to prove that you don't have to destroy people to build something beautiful." She turned her back to the view, facing her mentor. "Is the acquisition of the St. James estate finalized?" "Signed and sealed this morning," Silas confirmed, pulling a slim tablet from his jacket. "Robert St. James has declared personal bankruptcy. He's moved to a one-bedroom condo in Boca Raton. The St. James brand is dead. We buried it under the foundation of this tower." "Good," Clara said, her voice devoid of malice, flat and factual. "And the loose end?" Silas paused. He knew exactly who she meant. "That is a more specific situation," Silas said, stepping closer to the railing and looking down, way down, to the street level nearly 1,000 feet below. "We contracted a local landscaping firm to handle the plaza and the exterior gardens. They specialize in hiring men with difficult work histories, people who have been blacklisted from corporate jobs." Clara's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Bennett is currently employed by Greenleaf Landscaping," Silas revealed. "He is part of the ground crew. In fact, if my schedule is correct, he is currently planting the red azaleas lining the main entrance for the ribbon-cutting ceremony." Clara froze. The man who had told her she didn't fit his future was now literally gardening in her front yard. "Does he know?" Clara asked. "The building is plastered with your name, Clara," Silas noted. "He knows." Clara walked to the edge. She looked down. From this height, the people on the sidewalk were nothing more than specks, ants scurrying about their business. She tried to single out one specific speck, to feel some surge of anger or vindication or even pity. Down on the street, the reality was much grittier. The wind at street level wasn't a gentle breeze. It was a gusty tunnel effect created by the massive tower. Liam Bennett wiped a mixture of sweat and dirt from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. He was wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a stained t-shirt. His knees ached from kneeling on the concrete pavers for 6 hours. "Come on, Bennett!" the foreman shouted, checking his clipboard. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. If those bushes aren't straight, you're docked half a day's pay." I'm going," Liam muttered, grabbing another heavy pot of soil. His hands, once manicured for shaking hands in boardrooms, were now calloused and permanently stained with earth. No law firm would hire him after the St. James debacle. His reputation as the man who fumbled the biggest bag in Seattle history had made him a pariah. He had lost the penthouse, the car, the suits, and eventually his dignity. He jammed the shovel into the earth. Above him, a massive LED screen attached to the side of the building flickered to life. The audio system boomed across the plaza, echoing off the surrounding skyscrapers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairwoman of Caldwell Enterprises, the visionary behind the Evelyn Tower, Ms. Clara Caldwell." Liam stopped digging. He couldn't help himself. He looked up. On the giant screen, high definition and 50 feet tall, was Clara. She looked radiant, ethereal, like a goddess looking down from Mount Olympus. The camera zoomed in on her face as she stepped up to the microphone podium on the roof deck. She looked happy. She looked complete. Liam felt a physical pain in his chest, a hollowness that no amount of regret could fill. He looked at the shovel in his hand. Then he looked at the screen. "I bought that tie," he whispered to himself, remembering a time when she had saved for weeks to buy him a silk tie for an interview. Now she could buy the factory that made them. On the roof, Clara stared down at the plaza. "Do you want to have him removed?" Silas asked quietly. "We can have security escort the landscaping crew off-site before the press goes down." Clara considered it. She thought about the power she held. She could snap her fingers, and Liam would lose this job too. She could drive him out of the city, She could crush him until he was dust. But as she looked at the horizon, where the sun was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the snow-capped Olympic mountains, she realized something profound. Hating Liam required energy, punishing him required attention, and he simply wasn't worth the budget. He was no longer the villain of her story. He was just background noise. He was part of the scenery, like a fire hydrant or a park bench. He was just a man planting flowers in a garden she owned. "No," Clara said, turning away from the edge. "Let him stay. The azaleas need to be planted, and he seems to be good at digging holes for himself." She smiled at Silas, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Besides, Silas, I think I'm ready to move on. I need someone who fits my future, Clara, not someone who reminds me of where I came from." He sneered, adjusting his silk tie, a tie she had worked double shifts to buy him. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the glass, mirroring the storm about to tear Clara's life apart. She was 28, drowning in debt, and about to be homeless. But as Liam walked out of that diner and into the arms of another woman, he made the biggest miscalculation in financial history. He didn't know that the woman he just discarded was the sole heiress to the largest private real estate portfolio in North America. And by the time he found out, it would be too late to say sorry. The fluorescent lights of the Rusty Spoon diner buzzed with an irritating hum that usually gave Clara Mitchell a headache by the end of her 10-hour shift. Today, however, she couldn't hear it. She couldn't hear the clatter of silverware, the sizzling of grease from the kitchen, or the grumbling of the regulars. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears. Sitting in booth 4, the one with the torn red vinyl seat, was her husband of 5 years, Liam Bennett. He wasn't wearing his usual worn-out flannel. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit, tailored and sharp. Sitting next to him wasn't his brother or a friend, but a woman Clara recognized instantly, Chloe St. James. Chloe was the daughter of the city's most aggressive real estate developer. She was beautiful, polished, and looked at Clara with the kind of pity one reserves for a stray dog. "Sign it, Clara," Liam said, his voice devoid of the warmth it used to hold. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Clara's hands, red and chapped from scrubbing dishes, trembled as she reached for the papers. "Liam, we talked about this. We said we'd weather the storm. I just picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. I can pay for your certification exams next month." Liam let out a short, cruel laugh. He glanced at Chloe, who smirked and checked her gold Rolex. "There is no we anymore, Clara," Liam said.